Welcome back to this week's episode of COD Fun. I'm back here with Gavin.
Hey.
Today we're going to be talking about Black Ops 2, one of my favorites growing up. So we're going to be starting off with the campaign first, which, let's just start off with our opinions on it. Gavin, what's your opinion on the Black Ops 2 campaign?
I loved, Old Wounds. That was one of my favorite missions, riding the horse down and throwing a grenade in the tank, fighting on the tank. That was sweet, pristine, peak gameplay. Love it.
I loved especially just all the different missions, wrapping up the story and such. It felt like a very solid entry.
And it was also nice how it switched from like old war to new war.
You had the different guns, you can unlock them throughout the missions, you can unlock attachments. You also had stuff like your access kit and the perks you could get.
Yep.
Which, that was one of the Call of Duties. You could actually choose a loadout, but the thing is, it wasn't overbearing with the loadout. It was reasonable with how you could do it. Now, of course, the first mission you start off with, you got Prolific Victory, where you got Mason. You immediately start off with just the brutality of it. You got a man burning to death as Mason's trying to use a shovel to break open the glass.
That was...
It's quite the introduction because it's right in your face as you're just waiting for the game to load, and then all of a sudden you just see the dude just screaming.
Yeah, no, it is brutal of epic proportions, let's say.
And then, of course, you got Joseph Savimbi, which there's a bit of history, of course, with him. And then with him and Mason, they fight the MPLA, and Hudson is in the sky in a helicopter fighting tanks throughout the mission. Which, a bit of history of sorts, is that with Joseph Savimbi, his family actually sued, I believe it was Treyarch, over the game, saying that he was portrayed as a brutal, like, warmonger of sorts.
Yeah.
Which, it's a bit interesting when you think about it. But in the second half of the mission, you get to meet up with your old buddy Woods after you save him from a MPLA ship, where he looks pretty freaking horrible, to say the least. Eyes all bloodshot, covered in dirt.
Was that where he was in the storage container?
Yeah, storage container with a bunch of dead bodies.
Yeah.
Only survivor, I believe, out of that entire storage container. Then ship goes boom, you got to jump off, dive down, collect them. Then you end up stealthing your way throughout a MPLA village. Mm-hmm. Then when you finally reach comms, you get to meet the game's antagonist, Raul Mendez, as he's known as. And then that is where good old Alex Mason gets to shoot him in the eye. And that's just right after he tosses a grenade. And then you pretty much have to run for the rest of the mission.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the old missions. I remember that one. That one was pretty fun. And then walking with him on your shoulder. You know,
yeah, it's a very strong start, especially with Black Ops 2. You don't see that a lot of these days with the newer CODs, a strong start to a campaign.
Yeah, like instantly into it.
Then, of course, Mission 2, you actually go to the future, which is actually the present, because the first mission takes place in the past, where you play as David Mason, also known as Section, the son of Alex Mason, where you're going through the jungles with, I believe his name is Crosby and Salazar and Harper, trying to look for the Solarium device, which you end up finding that. You have to fight your way out. And then you meet good old Admiral Briggs, which he comes up a bit more in the story. Then, of course, we're going on to Gavin's next, his favorite mission,
Old Wounds. Start off the mission, briefing in the desert camp. And one thing I remember is before you get on your horse, if you walk back behind the cliff, you get a saber. So you can actually go around and slash people with the saber instead of actually using your weapons, which was fun. When I figured that out, I really still time I did the mission. That's what I did.
Because that's one of the perks of having the access kit on hand, because it would allow you to do these extra things in missions, like getting the saber and such. Now, a point I should have brought up earlier, but I'll bring it up now. The missions that take place back then, you're actually in the viewpoint of David Mason in a retirement home talking to Frank Woods, who, during Prolific Victory ends up being saved by Alex Mason in the past. Which you see Frank's in a wheelchair and such.
Old and decrepit and blue guy, yeah.
And still that same anger that we saw in Black Ops 1 with him. Now, the next mission, Time and Fate. Now, of course, these could potentially be out of order. Tried to find the best list I could. Was not easy. Time and Fate, I believe, is the one with Manuel Noriega. So
Noriega is fun to say.
Yeah. So with Noriega, you're allying with his soldiers. So it's you, Woods, Hudson, Manuel Noriega, and his soldiers going into which he, in the story, is a part of a cartel, Raul Mendez's house, which then the mission switches to Raul Mendez's point of view with his sister Josefina, which we never actually get to see the face of Josefina. And then throughout the mission, so Mendez ends up getting tranquilized. Manuel Noriega backstabs pretty much.
That mission was so confusing.
Yeah, it's going to say backstabs Woods, Hudson, and Mason, and releases Mendez, which I was always under the impression at first that Manuel Noriega got killed by Mendez, because right after Manuel Noriega shoots both of his soldiers there and then releases Mendez from his cuffs, Mendez goes into a rage over his sister Josefina and strangles him.
Yeah.
And then through
goes into his rage mode, running through cutting with machete and the Spaz 12.
Yeah, Spaz 12. You're just running throughout the mission with the machete. You'll switch. The game will randomly do that, and you'll just have like this red screen, and sometimes you'll see images of Josefina in the corner. And it is just one baffling mission, especially because right at the end when you're going through Mendez's point of view, you're in the hallway, you end up being tackled by Hudson, and then a grenade ends up going off, which then you discover who did that later in the mission. Mm-hmm. So then we end up going back to Woods and Mason, who had to fight through Mendez's compound and such. And then
I killed every single chick in that compound.
Well, eventually then you reach a cocaine bunker, which then in that bunker, which this is part of the thing I love about Black Ops 2, is that there's all these different choices and stuff like CIA information. We neglected to mention this for Old Wounds. At the end of the mission, you actually find Kurchenkov and then you interrogate him. If you don't resist killing him because of Reznov's brainwashing, you don't get the full information. But another piece of that information can be found in Time and Fate in the cocaine bunker, which everything points to like a mole being in the CIA. Mm-hmm. But then Woods and Mason end up getting to the same hallway. Woods tries to shoot Mendez, Mason stops him, and then Woods throws a grenade into the room with Josefina, which the mission ends with seeing both Mendez and Josefina in body bags. Mendez survives. Then, of course, Fallen Angel mission starts off with you in a flooded room with a giant, I'm not even sure if I'd call it a mech. It's almost like a robot dog.
Yeah.
And Harper ends up kicking it, fixing it, and you're just going through that mission fighting, and then eventually...
the water streets of...
Yeah, the water... I'm not sure exactly what the location was, but you end up going throughout the place and such, and then eventually you end up crashing a meeting with Mendez and DeFalco, which DeFalco will be brought up more in the next mission. But you end up going in on that meeting. Then it is discovered that Mendez already knows that you are there and sets off a bunch of explosives where you and Harper are hiding. So then a chase of sorts ensues where you're on a car and such, driving that. Then if you don't go fast enough, let's just say Harper needs some plastic surgery after getting a lot of flames to the face. Which then, at the end of that mission, you end up actually finding a secret meeting with General Zhao, I believe was his name, which you meet during Old Wounds, a much younger version of him, as he was friends with Alex Mason, which at the end of Old Wounds, another part that we're going back to, is the betrayal at the end of it, which it's left many people speculating how did they actually survive, because Mason ends up hallucinating Reznov on a horse, coming in and swooping them up and saving them with water and such. So it's like,
Yeah, how did they survive?
and as Frank will even say in the cutscene, there's no way that Mason just got up on the horse and just saved them. It doesn't make any sense. So it's like, was it really him or was it somebody else maybe and it was just a hallucination? But all we know is they survived that. Now, before we end up going into the next mission, we're going to talk about the Strike Force optional missions. You got FOB Spectre, Shipwreck, IED, Second Chance, and Dispatch. So FOB Spectre is where you're guarding this like compound against, I believe it's Menendez's forces, or it might be the Chinese.
It's where you
forces.
place all the people around. You have some robots, you control some drones, but it's mostly people. It was fun because you could go into that mission as one of the people and using their weapons.
Yeah, and you can also switch between the units and such. Then there's Shipwreck. It's the same map as Cargo. I think that's the name of it. Which, this is one of the cases where I'd say recycling a multiplayer map was not a bad thing. Because it still worked overall for what the purpose was.
Yeah.
But then with Shipwreck, you end up having to destroy a couple things and I believe bombard a ship freighter. IED, you are guarding some high-value people through the same area as Old Wounds, while you have a bunch of landmines, robots, and all this other stuff, and you're playing as robots. And then Dispatch is where you actually go for the assassination of General Zhao, which the big reveal of sorts is that he's actually working with the enemy now, which is why Section, as he's known as, assassinates him using his team. But then on to the next mission, Karma. So with the Solarium device, you find a bit of connection to Karma. And you go through this large resort kind of place with tons of security robots and all this other stuff. And first half of the mission, it's like, okay, you're walking around stuff, and then you and Salazar end up branching off from Harper. And then you go down, you end up having to shoot a bunch of guys and such, then just keep moving. You end up using a little bot named Ziggy, I remember. You gotta get some dudes like eye scan and such. It was a bit funny just messing around, going in the pipes and stuff. And then as you're messing around, especially with the data that you collect, you discover that Karma is not a weapon or a device. It is a person named Chloe Lynch, I believe was her name. Which then you end up fighting her in a club where she ends up being taken by DeFalco. And the whole place gets swarmed with Menendez's soldiers. You end up fighting through a Salazar. And then that's where another branching path sort of comes in, to where if you reach DeFalco fast enough, you can save Karma. If you don't, it actually unlocks another Strike Force mission named Second Chance, where if you do that, you get the opportunity to save her. And DeFalco will end up being killed actually in the final mission if he is still alive after the mission Karma. Now the next mission we're going to go over is Suffer With Me. It starts off with McKnight. At first it's talking about smearing Manuel Noriega. It's the giant, I believe, marine assault. I do not recall where, but I believe you're playing in the Steps of Woods for, I think it's either the second half of the mission or all of the mission. But as you're going through that, you end up fighting your way, and then Hudson tells you about Objective False Prophet, I believe it was called, where he tells you that they have captured Raul Menendez. You end up going to a roof, and you have the choice to either shoot, say, in the head, legs, your choice. Now, the information you get in previous missions could help with this. The whole CIA mole, which if you shoot in the legs or the head, it will change pretty much the ending. Because when you end up running out there, you discover it is not Raul Menendez, it is Alex Mason, who you either just killed or wounded. Which it is one fairly sad mission to go through, especially the very end we get our explanation of why Woods is in a wheelchair. He gets his knees both shot in by Menendez. And then you discover that he's kidnapped David Mason. Now keep in mind, this is in the past. All the missions with Woods and Alex Mason, those are in the past when David was still a child. So then Hudson ends up sacrificing himself to make sure David and Woods continue to live. Even though, as he says, he has a family and such, which makes you wonder, was Hudson a traitor? Was he, being held at gunpoint? It makes you wonder what happened to cause that kind of setup. What is your thoughts on that mission?
I hope that they make another sort of Black Ops 2 continuation, just to kind of explain some of the more of the stuff behind it, behind the intentions of the people.
Yeah. It's a story that is very packed with a lot of stuff, which I understand this episode we were spending a lot of time on the campaign, but this campaign is one of the, I would say, biggest when it comes down to the story. It's connected to Black Ops 1, it expands upon it all.
It is nice that they are connected. Yeah. I think they should have tried it. Did they connect Black Ops 3 with the rest of it, or no?
They barely did. They have a mention to Raul Menendez in Black Ops 3.
I think they should have connected it more. Maybe a more noticeable connection. Because 1, 2, and 3, maybe in 3 they should have, wrapped up loose ends.
Yeah, they did their own thing with 3, which, as we had talked about before, we didn't exactly mind 3 that badly.
Well, 3 is fun.
It had one confusing campaign and all, but we're going to head on to the next mission, Achilles Veil, where you are playing as undercover operative Farid. And you are undercover in Menendez's army that he's forming, which this is in the present day, where you end up having to fight through your own troops and such. You can get a saber during that mission, I believe. Could be wrong. I know you can also get a invisibility cloak during that mission.
The invisibility cloak was fun too, because you could use it to walk behind people and then just hit them from behind, and it was so nice. And then when they had the robot, was the robot not affected by the cloak, or was it? I forget.
I'm not sure. I didn't mess around with it too much, to be honest. So, as you continue out throughout the mission, you eventually reach where Menendez wants Farid to meet at. And then Harper's VTOL ends up being downed to where you got to make a choice, as Menendez says, show your loyalty by following my orders, Farid. To where you have the choice to attempt to kill Menendez or shoot Harper, which this is another one of those big choices that changes which ending you get. If you go to shoot Menendez ends up shooting Farid dies during the mission. But if you just shoot Harper, Farid lives, Harper's dead for the rest of the campaign.
And it was kind of nice how they made the different endings. Each action actually meant something.
Yeah.
Besides having one set path of the campaign, you just experienced it.
Yeah, which, as I said, they did the choices in a good way, too. It wasn't just in your face with a lot of things these days. It flowed with that still running gun shooter that Call of Duty's known for. Now, the next mission, Odysseys, which forgot to bring up, for number 8, Achilles Veil, you end up capturing Menendez at the end of the mission when you switch over to section. So then on the next mission, you're on the USS Obama, Admiral Briggs is there and stuff. So somehow, which you can make your guesses of sorts on how it happened from information you learn later on in that very same mission, Menendez escapes his cuffs while you and Salazar are in the cell. And then you and Salazar end up fighting a decent amount through the USS Obama, through Menendez's troops. And then, as you're doing that, you discover, after you switch to Menendez's point of view, which Menendez ends up breaking into the same room where Karma, Farid if he's alive, Admiral Briggs is in, and Salazar. So all the stuff starts getting shut down when Mason tries to warn Admiral Briggs. So then you see it as from the point of Menendez, either DeFalco or just a random soldier will follow with you into that mission. And you get the choice whether to kill Admiral Briggs or wound him, or just not shoot him at all.
It is weird decisions sometimes.
Yeah, I was gonna say it still gives a variety. Now, this mission is heavily influenced on whether you saved Karma and whether Farid is alive. Salazar will shoot Karma if Farid is not alive. Farid will take the bullet if so. Now, you actually learn that the solarium chip or something like that is in Menendez's false eyeball, which he ends up infecting the ship that everybody's on and affects the system. Now, then Section ends up getting to the room after a while. You talk with Briggs if he's still alive, and then Karma, if she's still alive too, she will try to start decrypting what Menendez has infected the system with. The next mission on the list is Cortes DI, where you are transporting, I believe, the president throughout that mission across, I forget if it's Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
You end up having to fight through a lot of Menendez's men and such as Section. Then eventually, as you're going through the mission, you will end up taking place in a jet where you have to take out stuff and cover the president as you're moving along. Then that would lead us into our last mission, Judgment Day, where you are going through the sky after your VTOL explodes and fighting through a place which inevitably ends up with you either killing or capturing Menendez.
I mean, what Call of Duty is it where you're not going out of something exploding?
It's just most Call of Duties. It's like a staple. It's like what Call of Duty truly has a helicopter actually stay up in the air for longer than 2 seconds without getting exploded. It's just a staple of Call of Duty. That's going to wrap up for the campaign missions and such, which if you want to find the endings, you can always find them online and such. There's plenty of videos out there. Now, I'm going to pass it over to Gavin when it comes down to the multiplayer.
Yeah, because for the multiplayer on 2, I did the ranked system on there, and it was pretty fun, competitive, When it comes to multiplayer, there's just meta classes that everybody uses no matter what. This class beats this class beats this class, and it's just repetitive kind of the multiplayer. But when you sit down to it, get down to it, you're playing with friends, it gets fun.
As Gavin says on here pretty often, is any game can be made fun with friends and such.
Any single game can be made fun with friends, which is a point I do like to get across.
I personally did not play the online multiplayer, played offline quite a bit, and it's like, with the meta guns and such, you see it especially a lot today, but the thing is, you didn't notice it as much back then, or it was just a part of the game. We didn't constantly complain about it.
Because it wasn't like where one gun was significantly better than other guns. It depends on what guns you were good at using.
It was still based on your skill and such.
Yeah. So if you're good with a shotgun, which it's pretty hard not to be good with a shotgun because it's just a clicking simulator. But if you're good with a shotgun and someone else is good with submachine guns, then
certain guns just beat out certain guns. Like a sniper from a long range could take out a shotgun player. Is gonna say.
I mean, a sniper from any range can take out any player if you're good enough with a sniper because it's just boof and they're gone. To be honest,
that's the point. Each gun has its play style, and each gun's better at fighting others. Especially when it comes down to the close range fight.
Yeah, it's mostly the range that changes the fight.
I was going to say with close range, you got the difference between shotgun, submachine gun, and assault rifle. And it's like, is that really it's more of a battle of faster fire rate at that point.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it had really nice secondaries, too, you could play around with.
Yeah, they had the beater.
I mean, you also had some of the special weapons. I know there was the crossbow that you could use.
I was so good with the crossbow. I could jump in the air, turn around, get him with it.
Yeah, which with Black Ops 2, you had the Select 10 system, and it was simplified. You could hop in, have fun. It was just a fun Call of Duty when it came down to multiplayer.
Yeah. And then that brings us over to the zombies, which I think that Black Ops 2 Zombies is probably one of my favorite zombies, right below 3. But Black Ops 2 is where they added Buried, Die Rise, Origins, Transit. And I played Transit more often than not because it's what my little brother liked. But
Yeah.
it was just so much more to
You
the
also had the
zombies than,
Nuketown map, which I forgot what that was named.
I think it was just named like Nuketown, but with like a 3.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing the maps. I personally have played Transit because I never had the chance to get like Rise, Origins, which of course, as I think I discussed in the Black Ops 3 episode, I got to play Origins in the Zombies Chronicle version on Black Ops 3. But Transit, I loved playing Transit. Most people hate that map with a burning passion. It's like running around.
I think it gives more to zombies than just surviving and shooting zombies. It's like more of a story to it. Same with Origins.
Only thing I hated truly about Transit is how much it sucked to end up making the Pack-a-Punch. Because especially on solo, it is almost impossible these days to do it. But, yeah. Anything else to add when it comes to that?
My personal favorite map is Buried. Experimenting with what the Giant can do on that map. It was fun to give him alcohol, give him candy, see what he does. And then it added more usefulness to like what is in the map than most other Call of Duties did.
Wasn't his nickname like Arthur or something like that?
I forget his name.
You give him like candy and stuff, which it also had the chalk mechanics and stuff. Which Black Ops 2 Zombies was also one of those with the permanent perks and such.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remembered hearing about those, and it's like those are fairly interesting. Like I remember it was like permanent drug or something like that. If you go down like 3 times in 3 separate matches on round 1 or something like that.
I never experienced permanent perks, but I have heard about them.
Yeah. I was going to say, and back then that was also one of the more difficult stages of Zombies, which also, like with the Transit map, we also could play the individual, like Farm City, the Bus Depot and stuff, which that, we had Grief, we have just the basic survival on those maps. I remember hearing about a game mode called Turned.
Turned was fun. Turned was so fun.
I heard a lot of people had fun with that.
It's like one person starts out as a zombie, and then it's infection. So.
Yeah. I never had the chance to play it though, sadly, but heard many people enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I think it is exclusive to Buried.
Yeah, I think it was on that one. So that's going to wrap up today's episode of COD Fun. We are going to be resuming it, I'm guessing next week most likely, with Call of Duty Ghosts.
Which should be fun to talk about. Okay, see you guys then.